So I was hoping you might be able to take us through the top 3 things that you need before you submit to an agent or publisher.
First of all, the writer needs to know what story they're telling, and I think quite often what happens is that they think they're trying to tell something, but really they're telling something else. Before they try to send it out into the world to anyone, it's a really good idea to be clear about exactly what story they're telling. Because quite often I see submission letters and I take electronic submissions, and I ask for a query or submission letter, as the terminology goes, a synopsis and the first 3,000 words of the manuscript. The synopsis is more for the author than for me. I mean, I read the synopsis to find out where the story's going, but the synopsis is a good exercise for the author to go through so that they can work out what story they're telling. And the query letter serves the same purpose, and in fact it distills it even more. Because quite a lot of writers will complain about writing a query letter, but it really helps them to work out what's going on in the manuscript. So if they write a letter, if they're writing a query letter and they have to write a fairly brief description of their story, whether it's fiction or non-fiction or children or adults, if they really struggle to encapsulate their story or define their story in 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, that says a lot about the manuscript they've written, much more than about their query letter writing skills. And that's why I think it's a worthwhile exercise to go through to try to write those pitches, write synopses, because so often I'll see letters that are just, I don't even know what the author is describing, and then I get to the manuscript and it's the same thing. I don't know what story they're telling. I haven't come across letters really where the author's been able to describe clearly what their story is, and then the manuscript's a mess. So those things really go hand in hand, and it can be hard to think about one's own work if one is the writer, but that's why it's good to take time with the process. So once you've finished a draft, to set it aside, let it marinate in your brain for a while, and then come back to it and look at it with fresh eyes. So it's a courtesy to the reader to know which story you're telling, and fundamentally the storyteller's role is to connect to an audience, is to tell a story to an audience. So that's where it starts, at that early drafting stage. So for the manuscript to be ready for submission, that's not unrelated to the first one, in that it's especially if it's your first novel or your first manuscript, non-fiction manuscript, it's essentially an education. What you're going through, you're educating yourself in how to write, and those first ones will usually always take longer than anything that will come after, because you're really working out what you're doing and how long drafts take. So it's really, really common for writers with their first manuscripts in particular to get extremely excited that they have finished a draft and to send it off the day it's finished to every agent and publisher they can think of. And of course that first draft is never going to be the most ready that the manuscript can be. The first draft is always the training wheels draft, even for very experienced and published writers. That's usually the case. So I think it's about the author or the writers learning patience through the process. So being patient with themselves, being patient with the story, realising that it's going to take a little time to get that story to a maturation point where it's ready to be seen by people like me and by publishers who know. We know that when we're looking at a submission that it's not the ultimate draft of that manuscript, but we need to be able to see that there's enough there that we can understand what the author's doing and know whether or not we want to take it on. And I think that the patience part of that is related to the third point I mentioned, which is realistic expectations about the process. And so it's not just realistic expectations about how long I'm going to take to read your submission or someone else will take. It's realistic expectations about how long the whole process is going to take, how long drafting is going to take, how long that education is going to take that the writer has embarked on. So it's really, I think, if this is where I think Year of the Novel and Year of the Edit, which are two courses that QWC has been running for a while are really useful because the very name of them sets up the expectation that these things will take time. That it's not going to be just a year of writing, but also there may be a year of editing after that. And that's really valuable, just even putting that out into the culture to say, writers, it will take at least a year to do all of this, because many writers, I think, do themselves and their stories a great disservice by just getting overexcited, which they're entitled to do, but sometimes, you know, they send it off and then it's over and people reject it because it's not ready, and then they get disheartened and they may never write again. And that could be someone who would have been a fantastic storyteller who's lost to us just because they acted too quickly.